Hello, you multi-material multiverses, and thank you to Istvan Ksik for that malt mention. Thank you, Istvan. And I'm Ralphie, here in the Bothy, about to do a whisky review by me for you in Ralphie Review 989. Now, this review is part of an ongoing World Whisky Series 2022-23. You're used to it by now. It's a classic little blooper. It says, which year is it? Right, which universe am I in? Which plan am I on? Never mind. A glass of whisky keeps me grounded. I've been really enjoying this one. This is a Swedish whisky from Mackmyra Distillery called Svensk Rock. I'll be telling you about it, introducing it, reviewing it and malt marking it just shortly. But before I do that, I just want to take the opportunity to let you know that I'm really enjoying this World Whisky Tour. It's taken me in over 6 single malt whiskies to India, to England, to Ireland, to Tasmania, and I've yet to go to the USA with what is technically the final review. But before I get there, we're going to Sweden. Many countries are out there, and I want to say thank you to all my Patreon subscribers who have in turn been recommending whiskies to me from Argentina, from Portugal, from Italy, from the Puri Distillery, from Israel, Milk and Honey. Fascinating variety, diversity and options. And this is something that I've really noticed, actually sitting down and putting these whiskies side by side. Having bought these 6 bottles and just comparing and contrasting them, is that although we enjoy and recognise the diversity of smells and flavours, specifically in Scotch whisky, even beyond the fact that you have this distinction between peated and unpeated Scotch whisky, there's a phenomenal amount of individual singular personalities, particularly to be found in the single malts and then reflected in the blended malts and just occasionally seen in the blended Scotch, which involves grain and malt whisky. But with World Whisky, you're extending the range of the diversity of experience, purely of experience. And certainly the Indri Trini Indian whisky, which I reviewed recently, I really was tasting a distinct whisky that had the character of a rum, and in a good way. Likewise, I'm tasting a very mature, nicely matured Swedish whisky in this review, which has the characteristic of a whisky, but a different flavour range sensation experience, simply because of the way they've done it, which would not be allowable in Scotch whisky, unfortunately. And one of my concerns is that the Scotch whisky industry leaders are sticking to too narrow a formula and straight-jacketing the interpretation and production of Scotch whisky in the modern market to its deficit and not to its advantage. And this is something that world whisky producers, whether being in England, Ireland or anywhere in the world, are picking up on and saying, well, we know what Scotch tastes like, how are we going to do it? So this is from Mackmyra Distillery. It's been going for roughly 22 years. So by any stretch of the imagination, this isn't a new, recently opened distillery that's just giving you super young but well matured whisky and just finding its feet. Mackmyra is way beyond that. It's one of the first modern Swedish distilleries, and despite getting off to what I would call a fairly mixed start, with flavours that people wouldn't initially be sympathetic to, So much has changed so much in such a short space of time, and the awareness and the acceptance and in fact the engagement with different flavours really comes through with this particular bottling. It does have its downside, but I'll come to that shortly. So where will we start? We'll start with the smell and a brief introduction. A non-age statement whisky. This has been bottled at 46.1%, and it's a peated whisky, and it says it very clearly in the front label, and I'm going to quote, "Inspired by the Swedish tradition of seasoning and drying food over smoking juniper twigs. A timeless flavour that's now captured in this peated whisky." Now, when you read that as a whisky drinker, your first reaction is going to be, uh-oh, am I buying a whisky that just tastes a bit like gin? I'd just like to clarify that situation for you by saying, no, you're not. I've spent quite a bit of time with this whisky, as you can see, and I'm not finding any overt gin notes, as if it been just put into a gin cask. This is far more complex. It's far more substantial and far-reaching in the fact that they are burning juniper twigs along with the other woods, stroke, peat, whatever they're using to kiln the barley for making this whisky. And it's adding an extra aromatic earthiness, which has a hint of juniper about it, but nothing in the way you would find it in a standard recognisable gin. That, in my opinion, is a really positive and good start. How about the smell? Here we go. Wish me luck. Pungent, distinctive, clean, fresh. I'd put this about 7-8 years old in the cask, because of course Sweden is a higher latitude than Scotland, and therefore the temperatures during the winter are colder, so the length of maturation to produce results is going to be longer. But in that increased length of maturation, you have a certain calibre of maturation, and one of the results is that the phenolic components of the whisky survive more intact for longer. And this, by the way, I haven't seen it discussed anywhere else so far, but it's certainly one of the observations I make. So on the nose, tangy, twiggy, fire smoke. Outside fire smoke, when you're clearing out the garden and you've allowed the leaves to brown off, and you've shaken up your fire pit a few times to let the air dry and remove the dampness, so you're not getting that thick, heavy purple smoke. You're getting a lighter, whiter smoke, which carries more sort of freshness and autumnal smells in it, or mixed with the autumnal smells, it's simply much more nostalgic. That's the sort of smoke I'm getting here. Initial taste, and I will be adding water soon. A sharp attack, a citrus, peat, juniper note that's not gin-like. It's more medicinal, it's more aromatic, it's more hot, spicy. And this really dominates, that arrival dominates the entire event. You're really not going to taste much after it. Again, suggesting that this is a relatively young whisky. But the price, I paid just under £49, is not, in the scheme of things, unreasonable. However, there is an issue here, which I'll come to shortly. You've probably already spotted it. So I've added a drop of water to this. In fact, I've added 4 millilitres, so not too much, and I will be adding more shortly. This is clearly a very spirit-driven event. The cask influence has been slightly mildly toffee, sort of dry syrup note. So the cask influence is relatively restrained, so as to kind of showcase this complex aromatic peat note. Peat mixed vegetal note. So it's more than peat. And it comes across in the note on the nose. If you smell this, you're saying, oh, this would be if it was a Scotch whisky, this is a weird one. I don't recognise the distillery. Because it's sufficiently different that you will pick up on it immediately. Once you've added water, settling down, more melon notes, pear notes, slight marshmallow note, and there's a sort of soft toffee stroke dry syrup note as well on the nose. There's more pungency, restrained pungency on the nose, with a little bit of mild cola, very mild cola, mixed with a little Turkish Delight Rose Otto note, and some soft sugar candy. You call it soft rock tablet in the background. Very engaging, and as it settles down more, you get this wine note appears. It's rather like a muscatel note, a German white wine, which is semi-sweet, so not too dry. That's appearing as well. Taste. Transformed, utterly transformed. Soft, languid, gutsy arrival. So we're getting a good mouthfeel to this as well, suggesting that they've been restrained with chill filtering if they've done any at all. Now I've been looking for a little bit of Swedish mist in the glass, but funnily enough I'm not seeing too much. So I suspect, I'm wondering if this is more than double distilled to isolate aromatic notes. It's potentially the case, but to break it down, the arrival, slightly solventy, aromatic, cough mixture, twigs, lots of twig smoke, garden fire smoke, as if something like bay leaves had gone in the fire. Some evergreen thing has gone, and it's still slightly damp despite the rest of the fire wood being dry, and it brings this almost a perfumed note, a dense complex perfume note into the air as the smoke rises, and it's been kind of captured in this whisky. The development is really a continuity of the arrival, with a little mild gingeriness and a soft melon note in there. And then the finish again, we're back to soft tangy, peaty, a peaty riposte, you would call it, in the finish, which lingers on, very pleasant. And most enjoyable about it is it's distinctive and different. It's just a different type of whisky that you really wouldn't get from Scotland. You don't get it from Scotland. You don't find this kind of whisky in Scotland. And I find this encouraging because here you see another European distillery finding its feet, and as it does, it's gaining confidence in how it chooses to interpret the whisky experience, based on the foundations that it will be a spirit which is 100% grain sourced, and that grain in this instance is malted barley. But apart from that, they're looking at the flavouring that goes into it, because they are not bound by the protocols of Scotch whisky, the stodginess of Scotch whisky's tradition as interpreted by the industry controllers, and they're taking advantage of this with great success. The only downside is this is a 50 centilitre bottle, and if you come back to my review 989 extras, which is coming along shortly after this review, I'm really going to discuss and take a bit more of a deep dive into the psychology and the practical advantages that distillers feel by using 50 centilitre bottles instead of 70 litre bottles. And I have to say, for the record, I very rarely buy 50 centilitre bottles because I regard them as a rip-off. Yeah, I do. I regard them as a short measure. And I almost didn't buy this because of that. But I'm not here in the bothy to cut my nose, to spite my face, as the old saying goes, and just refuse to review a really good quality whisky which is worth sharing to give you background and give you an overview of global whisky, simply because it's in a 50 centilitre bottle. But in my next review extras, I will rip into Mackmyra for using this bottle, and I'll tell you exactly why. And I'm sure Mackmyra Distillery will become aware of it. And there you go. So let's conclude now with a malt mark, and I'm basing that, sure, it's on the whisky, but inevitably I'm looking at the whole experience here. That 50 centilitre bottle is knocking things back for me. 81 out of 100, there we go. It's a malt mark, M-A-L-T, malt. It's a malt mark. And thank you for watching. Well, thank you for watching my review. Please leave a comment if you'd like. Leave a malt mention if you wish. Click subscribe if you haven't already, and have a think about my Patreon channel with its extra additional content. There you go. I'm Ralphie. This review is done and dusted. It's time for you to move on, for me to move on, because we'll be meeting again in another review very shortly. Bye.